Welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast. Sometimes you just got to dig beneath the surface to find those real hidden gems in the stock market. And that's what we're doing today with Castellum, ticker symbol CTM.
CTM.
This company has been making some serious moves, climbing the charts, hitting a 52-week high. So we're going to break down, what's driving this surge. And, is this a trend that's got legs?
It's interesting. What's got me excited about Castellum is this isn't just a random spike in the market. This is, there's a story unfolding here. It's like a perfect storm of smart decisions, positive sentiment in the market that could mean really big things for this company.
Right. Okay, so let's unpack this story a little bit. First off, we've got this incredible stock price jump, like almost 47% in just a few days. I mean, that's incredible. From 41 cents to 57 cents.
Wow.
It pushed Castellum past that 52-week high of 44 cents. And that kind of performance, that always gets investors talking, right?
Yeah.
Especially those who love a good small cap stock narrative.
Oh, absolutely.
But the question is, what's the fuel? What's propelling this rocket?
Well, the market for small cap stocks, it's hot right now. And Castellum seems to be riding that wave of, all this optimism. But it's not just about being in the right place at the right time.
Right.
Castellum's been making some really strategic moves, like they're thinking long term.
Yeah, like their alliance with Krilla Kilauea. They're going after those big Department of Defense contracts.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's not just about, snagging a few contracts here and there. That's a statement. Castellum's thinking big. They want to be a major player in the defense sector. And that could be huge for their growth.
Huge.
Yeah.
And we can't forget about the financials.
Right.
Like they've got a good rating, but their yearly growth is over 74% with a market cap of just 22.7 million. I mean, that's impressive.
That is very impressive. You know what that tells me? That tells me Castellum is operating like a well-oiled machine. They're outperforming companies many times their size in the telecom space. And that catches the eye of investors who are looking for those diamonds in the rough, the ones that are, ready to explode.
Yeah, it's like they're building this powerhouse under the radar.
Yeah.
And now with this surge in stock price, it's like the market's finally waking up.
I think you're right. And that good financial health rating, that adds another layer of confidence for those investors.
Right.
It shows stability, it shows a well-managed company, and that can be really appealing in a market that sometimes feels a little bit like a roller coaster.
Totally. Now, you mentioned strategic moves before. One that really caught my eye was their debt reduction. They brought it down to 10.3 million. They even paid off their entire term loan with Live Oak Banking Company. That's got to be a good sign, right?
Debt reduction, yeah, it can be a good sign, but it's not always so straightforward.
Right.
While it does free up capital for potential reinvestments and it can boost their creditworthiness, it's important to understand how they achieve that reduction. Do they have to sell off assets? Do they maybe limit their growth opportunities in other areas to make that happen? You always have to dig a little deeper.
That's a really good point. You can't just look at the numbers in isolation, right? You got to understand the whole picture. So we talked about debt reduction, but their revenue growth has been pretty impressive as well, climbing steadily each quarter, 11.3 million in Q1, 11.5 in Q2, and then 11.6 in Q3. And their gross profits are on the rise too, hitting 5 million in Q3. So, we're seeing this clear upward trend, and that just adds to that positive sentiment we were talking about.
Yeah, it does. But let's step back for a second and think about those revenue numbers. How do they stack up against their competitors in the telecom world? Are they actually gaining market share, or is the whole industry on this upswing? That context is important for an investor to really see where Castellum stands.
Okay, so you're saying we need to look at the bigger picture. What about their recent contract win? 4.1 million with the National Science Foundation through their partnership with Epic Systems. And that seems like a pretty significant win for a company of their size.
Contract wins, they are crucial, right? It's one thing to talk about partnerships and strategies, but actually turning those into real revenue, that's where the rubber meets the road. And this particular win, it shows they can execute on their vision. And it could open doors to even more opportunities in that public sector.
Oh, it does.
It really does.
So it sounds like Castellum is a company with a lot of moving parts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's definitely a lot to consider. It's like putting a puzzle together.
Right.
You got all these pieces of information about Castellum, but you don't see the whole picture until you start connecting them.
Yep.
Then you start to see the potential.
Exactly. And that's what we try to do here on Investing Talk Podcast.
Yeah.
We want to equip you with the knowledge to make those smart investment decisions. So we've talked about Castellum's growth, their strategic moves, their financial health. But let's talk about something we haven't touched on yet. The CEO. What's his perspective?
Glenn Ives?
Yeah, Glenn Ives. He's been pretty vocal about his outlook for the company.
Right. He hasn't been shy about the challenges. He's been very clear that securing new contracts is essential for Castellum to really take off.
And I think that kind of transparency is refreshing,
Yeah.
especially from a CEO.
Ooh, for sure. It builds trust with investors. When a CEO is straight up about the road ahead.
It shows they're thinking long-term. They're not just chasing those quick wins.
Exactly. They're focused on building a sustainable business. And his emphasis on new contracts that highlights a really key part of Castellum's strategy. They're not sitting back and waiting for things to happen. They're actively hunting down new opportunities.
Yeah, they're not content with just maintaining. They want to grow. They want to be bigger.
And that's what investors want to see, right?
Right.
That hunger, that drive.
Absolutely. But, we've been talking a lot about numbers and strategies and market trends. I want to shift gears for a second and talk about the people.
The people.
Yeah, the employees, the leadership team, the customers. What's the story there?
That's important. Numbers, they tell one story, but it's the people who write that story.
Right. A company is more than just its financials.
Right. It's about the people who make it all happen.
Exactly. And Castellum's success, it ultimately hinges on their ability to keep those customers happy and to deliver on their promises.
Totally. Service quality, reliability, those are crucial in telecom.
Especially
If Castellum can build those strong relationships and really go above and beyond for their customers, that could give them a real edge.
It could. It absolutely could.
So as we continue to look at Castellum, we got to keep the human factor in mind, even if we don't have all the information right now. It's about looking beyond the numbers.
Agreed. It's about the people driving that success.
So we've been focusing on Castellum's recent performance, the factors behind their stock surge. But let's zoom out for a second.
Okay.
Where do they fit in the bigger picture?
The whole
telecom landscape.
But a question. The telecom sector is super dynamic right now. 5G is evolving. Demand for data is exploding. And there's all this consolidation happening.
It's like a competitive space.
Yeah.
Lots of players vying for that top spot.
Yeah, for sure.
So where does Castellum fit in?
Well, it seems like they're carving out a niche in the government and public sector.
Like with the Acrylic-Elioia partnership and the National Science Foundation contract.
Exactly. That's right. It's a smart move. Focusing on a niche like that, it helps them stand out from the crowd.
Right. It helps them become a leader in that specific market.
Exactly. But there are risks. Relying too much on government contracts, that can be risky. What happens if political priorities change? Or if budgets get cut?
That's a good point. So diversification is key.
Yeah.
Even when you have a strong niche.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You never want to put all your eggs in one basket.
Okay. So we've talked about strategic positioning, the competitive landscape. But what about innovation? The telecom industry is constantly evolving.
It is.
Companies have to stay ahead of the curve to survive. What's Castellum doing in that area?
That's a good question. And honestly, the information we have is a little limited.
Right.
We don't have a ton of details about their R&D investments or their adoption of new technologies.
Okay. So that's something we need to keep an eye on. Their ability to innovate. That's going to be critical for their long-term success.
Absolutely. In any industry, but especially telecom.
So we've covered a lot of ground with Castellum, but let's bring it back to the investor. What are the key takeaways?
Castellum is a company on the move. There's no doubt about that. They're growing, they're making smart decisions, and their leadership is hungry for more. But, and this is important, every investment comes with risk.
Especially with a small cap stock like Castellum, right? They can be a little more volatile than those big established companies. And we talked about their focus on government contracts, which, could be affected by things like politics and budget cuts.
Absolutely. Those are things you definitely want to consider. Weigh the potential rewards against those inherent risks.
Right. It comes down to your own research and your risk tolerance.
That's right. No two investors are the same.
Exactly. We can give you the information and the insights, but ultimately, it's your decision whether to invest in Castellum or not.
And that decision should always be based on your own financial goals, your risk tolerance, and your investment timeline. There's no one-size-fits-all approach.
All right, so let's say you've done your homework, you've looked at the risks, and you're feeling good about Castellum. What should you be watching for? What are the signs?
Well, I'd say keep a close eye on those earnings reports. Those are going to give you a much clearer picture of their financial performance, how well they're converting contracts into revenue, and their overall growth trajectory.
It's more than just the numbers, though.
Right.
It's about how those numbers stack up against expectations and how the market reacts.
Exactly. A positive earnings surprise could send that stock price through the roof, and a disappointing report could trigger a sell-off. So you got to pay attention to the hard data and the market sentiment.
You mentioned earlier that we don't have a lot of information about Castellum's approach to technology and innovation. How can investors stay informed about that?
Well, I would say keep an eye on their company announcements, press releases. They might highlight new partnerships or investments in R&D or the adoption of new technologies.
And industry publications and news sources, those can be really helpful too,
Right.
to give you that broader context.
Oh, absolutely. Staying informed about the industry as a whole can really help you understand Castellum's performance and their potential.
So even though Castellum is making headlines right now with that impressive stock performance, it's important to remember this is just a snapshot. The market's always changing, and companies, even the successful ones, can run into unexpected roadblocks.
That's why you always got to be doing your research, staying engaged, and be ready to adapt your strategy as needed.
So as we wrap up our look at Castellum, it's clear this is a company to watch. They're making smart moves, and the future looks bright. But like any investment, there's always risk. It's about weighing those risks against the potential rewards and making decisions that are right for you. What stood out to you the most about Castellum?
For me, it's got to be that focus on the government and public sector. It's a niche market with huge potential, but it also comes with its own unique set of challenges. I'm really curious to see how they navigate that space and if they can keep landing those big contracts.
It's a high-stakes game for sure. Every
Okay.
move matters.
Exactly. That's what makes investing so interesting. You're not just looking at numbers. You're trying to understand the story behind those numbers, the strategies, the people making those decisions.
Well said. And that's what we're all about here on Investing Talk Podcast, bringing you those stories, the insights, the analysis to help you make smarter investment decisions.
Hopefully you found this deep dive into Castellum helpful, and we encourage you to keep exploring the world of investing. Stay curious, stay informed.
And please remember, do your own research before making any investment decisions. We're here to guide you, but at the end of the day, it's your money, and you got to be comfortable with the risks. Don't forget to subscribe to Investing Talk Podcast so you don't miss out on future episodes. Share this episode with your friends, family, anyone who you think might find it useful, and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Thanks for listening, and happy investing.